Pokémon has been in my life for a very, very long time. The cards, the games, the shows, the plushies. Trust me, I've been through all of it. It's been with me through almost most of my life, alongside some huge milestones, and I honestly don't know if I'd be the same person today without it. For as long as I can remember, I have been obsessed with animals. Millions of different species, each with their own quirks and skills. Some of them were cute, mysterious, ferocious, cool, and I needed to learn about all of them. It's no surprise that this obsession drew me towards games such as Webkinz, Nintendogs, and of course Pokémon. I can actually trace my love for Pokémon back to one single moment where it all began. When I was in 2nd grade, my classmate brought in Pokémon cards for his show and tell. He passed out one card for each of us, and I will never forget when I first laid eyes on this Tailo from the 2005 Deoxys set. It was love at first sight. When I went home that day, I just had to watch the anime, and later convinced my cousins to teach me all that they knew about Pokémon. I remember one of my cousins giving me his base set common cards, but at the time I didn't know they were commons. I was just so happy to be getting more cards and getting some friends for my little Tailo card. I was also so excited to be getting my first Pikachu card. I would line up my Pokemon cards upright on the couch so that they could watch all the anime with me and enjoy it. I collected as many cards, stuffed animals, stickers, and figures as I could get my hands on. Being a collector was my early days with Pokemon. It wasn't until years later in 2011 that my gaming journey would begin. For my birthday that year, I received a shiny new pink DS Lite, a knockoff Nintendogs game, and Pokemon White. There were no bounds to the joy I felt now that I could go on my very own Pokemon journey. I could finally experience becoming the very best and catching them all just like in the cartoon I'd been watching for years. Hearing about many other stories in the Pokemon community, I've learned one thing for sure. You never forget how it felt to go on your first Pokemon journey. Even though I had joined the fanbase around the Gen 3 and Gen 4 era, I jumped into the mainline Pokemon games at kind of a weird point in the series. Pokemon Black and White were a big change to the series, only featuring brand new Pokemon in the main game until post-game, forcing players to explore and rely on unfamiliar species rather than relying on old favorites. These games introduced a more complex narrative, focusing on the ethics of Pokemon training and the morals of using Pokemon to battle for people. At the time, I had no idea all of these huge changes in the series were being made. I was just so happy to finally be playing a Pokemon game. I was ecstatic to have my very own elemental companions besides me. To me, Unova felt so alive. The beauty of the seasonal changes, trees bloom in the spring, snow blankets the landscape in winter, and autumn brought such a warm glow to the environment. The animation style added fluidity to battles, making Pokemon movements feel realistic, almost as if they had real personalities of their own. The sprites, though 2D, were given such attention to detail that they expressed emotion and intensity in every move. I fell in love with Pokemon White instantly. I took that game everywhere I could, especially on vacations and to my siblings' sports games to keep me entertained. One time, I had lost my DS for a month and I was freaking out because I couldn't play Pokemon. I remember sitting at night and literally praying to bring back my DS so I could keep playing Pokemon White. The characters and plotlines are so immersive in Unova. Sharon and Bianca were my rivals, but they felt like my friends as we learned and grew stronger together. The plot with Bianca coming into her own strength and learning about independence inspired me a lot, and I felt I could relate to her since it was also my first Pokemon journey. But something truly unforgettable to me from Black and White is the character known as N. N is not the typical Pokemon antagonist. He is a mirror to the player, a deeply philosophical character who challenges the core beliefs of the Pokemon world. I truly looked forward to running into N during my playthrough because of how interesting and compelling his character and dialogue is. N's beliefs are rooted in the idea that Pokemon should be free, not confined to Pokeballs or forced into battles, and he genuinely questions whether the bonds between humans and Pokemon are based on love or dominance. This central conflict drives much of the narrative tension, forcing players to confront their own ideals and to see the world of Pokemon through a more introspective lens. I can appreciate this much more years later, but honestly as a kid, I was a bit more focused on having fun in the game. It felt like there were secrets for me to discover everywhere I turned, and going off the main path would reward me with hidden treasures or areas. It truly felt like a genuine adventure. Places like Pinwheel Forest and Chargestone Cave felt so enchanted and mystical. When I reached Castelia City for the first time, it genuinely felt like a huge city and I just had to explore every corner of it. The game felt so rich in lore and content that there was more to learn every place I explored. Even though Gen 5 Pokemon designs are some of the most disliked designs in the Pokemon community, when I discovered them for the first time, I thought that they looked extremely unique and like nothing I'd seen before. For my first Pokemon, I chose Tepig. And honestly, looking back, I kind of wish I'd gone with Oshawott as my first Pokemon. But at the time, I just thought Tepig was cute, and I had no idea that he would later stand up on 2 legs like a full-grown man. But Emboar does still have a huge place in my heart, and I couldn't have beaten the game without him, so I'm grateful for that. My original team was the Pokemon I picked up in the starting routes: Lillipup, Patrat, Perleon, and the gifted elemental monkey Pansage. I also caught a Munna in the Dream Yard, giving me a full team right off the bat. As the game progressed, I tried to catch every single Pokemon I came across. Some Pokemon really stuck out to me. Like, I remember thinking Blitzel and Zebstrika were sick-looking Pokemon, and they were one of my favorite designs. I was ecstatic when I encountered a wild Excadrill in Victory Road. I was so excited that I decided to use my Master Ball. I honestly had no idea that we could catch the box legendaries, and I just thought that they were these untouchable gods that we couldn't catch. But when I eventually got to the legendary battle, I was luckily able to catch Zac with the Ultra Balls I brought with me. To this day, when I receive the Master Ball in a Pokemon game, I always think back to that unfortunate moment. The roaming legendaries also had a huge sense of mystery around them. I remember chasing Thundurus for weeks. I had to Google techniques to catch it. That little shit was the bane of my existence for like half a summer. I would go on YouTube and be totally misled by videos showing someone catching a wild Rayquaza or Arceus in Pokemon White, not realizing that they were probably using cheat codes for the encounter. I thought that truly, if I looked hard enough, I could find more legendaries. I would dive in the undersea ruins, where once you enter, you only have a few minutes to search before the maze whirlpooled you out and you have to start again. I spent hours searching this place, convinced that a legendary or ultra rare Pokemon was waiting for me. I just had to go down the right path in time. Eventually, I found a YouTube video that had led me down a correct path to a legendary Pokemon waiting for me in the giant chasm. After being let down so many times, I was a little skeptical as I followed the correct path to Kyurem. But lo and behold, this was real, and Kyurem is actually a huge part of the Unova story. I also should have guessed that the YouTube video was legit due to the NPCs who hint at Kyurem's existence in the town nearby. What I really appreciated while playing Black and White was the music, map designs, and characters. Each town and city felt so unique with its own lore and secrets. Every time I entered a new town, I'd make sure to go into every house and talk to people, not just because they might give me an item or want to trade, but they might have a bit of lore to share, or just straight up have something funky to say. I would spend hours in Castelia City trying to run into people rushing to work just to see what their dialogue is. I feel incredibly grateful that White was my first Pokemon adventure. Unova feels so alive and has real emotion and depth. The game has rich graphics, philosophical undertones, and unforgettable characters. It felt like at every turn there was so much to explore, and the wilderness felt so vast and real. Sometimes I would sit in a location and just listen to the music and ambiance, and I still do that to this day, especially in Andela Town. The waves crashing with the soft music feels so serene and peaceful. Even just sitting in the gates and listening to the music while watching the updates on the billboard, it's places like these that make Unova so special to me. A couple years after I finished the game, I actually ended up giving away all my Pokemon games to my younger cousin since I didn't play them as much as I used to. I deeply regret that decision and very much wish I still had my original copy with my first partner Pokemon Emboar and my original team. Maybe he's still out there somewhere. Whenever I get a used copy of an old Pokemon game and see those timestamps, I think about my old team. I get sentimental and can't wipe the game without feeling bad. So I end up transferring those Pokemon to my own copies so they don't perish forever. Don't judge me, okay? I know I can't be the only one who's done this. Even after I got rid of the game, I still thought about Unova and my first team for years. And eventually I had bought another copy, and then even played the sequel, White 2, for the first time. I truly see the hype for that game. It builds off Black and White in the best way and makes for a perfect Pokemon entry. The details like being able to catch N's Pokemon and seeing flashbacks make my inner child so happy. I'm still playing through it to this day and slowly discovering all the little secrets. I'm also working my way up to get that shiny Haxorus after finishing the National Dex. While I was in Reversal Mountain with Bianca, I ran into a shiny Numel. And you know what she did while I was trying to catch it? She murdered it. I got a photo of it right as it was fainting. I couldn't pick up the game for at least a week after that, and I don't think I can ever look at Bianca the same again. Even though I played other Pokemon games in my childhood, my adventures in Unova stood out to me the most and honestly have been hard to live up to. Childhood nostalgia might also be a bit to blame here, but some of the recent titles of Pokemon just haven't really felt like Pokemon to me. This topic has been covered a million times over, and I'm definitely not the only person on YouTube with this take. The jump from 2D to 3D Pokemon changed a lot about the series, and games like Platinum, Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and the Gen 5 games now feel like they were kind of the golden age of Pokemon. Again, my perspective might be swayed because these were my childhood games, but jumping to modern day Pokemon, it's no secret that recent Pokemon games have been under a lot of controversy. I was genuinely excited for Sword and Shield, anticipating a fresh adventure in a brand new region on the Nintendo Switch. However, these games felt emotionally hollow and lacked the depth I hoped for, with graphics and design that felt flat and characters who failed to really connect deeply. The Wild area did introduce an interesting new concept that we hadn't seen before. The A wild area would have been something I dreamed about having as a kid. Seeing a Pokémon actually walking in the world, making them come to life and seeing them move. While the games had potential, it felt like they missed the emotional impact and sense of growth to find great Pokémon adventures. Scarlet and Violet was actually pretty fun at times, but still felt a bit hollow and unfinished to me. Whenever the game glitched, it would kind of just take me out of the experience I was in. A huge day in Pokemon history was Pokemon Day 2021, which included a Pokemon Direct and the announcement of a brand new game unlike anything we'd seen before. Pokemon Legends Arceus. A big spark of excitement and hope was created in the Pokemon community just from that trailer. This game was like nothing we'd seen from Pokemon before, and it looked so fresh and open. Playing Legends Arceus truly reignited the magic of Pokemon to me. The world's open world design allows for a truly immersive experience. You can finally interact with Pokemon in their natural habitats, watching them react in various ways, whether they flee, attack, or challenge you. This dynamic approach felt like what the Pokemon series has been missing for a long time. I've logged over 100 hours in that game, which is more than I've done for any other Pokemon game, probably since the DS era. The sense of exploration is unparalleled, and the game has a strong sense of freedom. Rather than just running into a wild Pokemon and beginning a battle, you have the option to engage with Pokemon from different angles, sneaking up on them, using bait, or engaging in battle. Legends Arceus felt like a genuine evolution of the Pokemon world. The Hisui region has rich lore and a captivating story, and offers a compelling narrative that connects deeply with fans, both old and new. This game not only rekindled my love for Pokemon, but also sets a new standard for the franchise. Legends has left me hopeful for the future games in the franchise. It really reignites the feeling of discovery and adventure that I felt back in the 2D era, which I didn't know I'd feel again with the new Pokemon titles. With Legends ZA on the horizon in 2025, who knows if we'll ever get a Legends game for Pokemon Black and White. I honestly don't know if the magic of Unova can be correctly captured in a 3D Pokemon game, but the thought of revisiting those places I treasure so much in updated graphics is still a little exciting. Because Pokemon White was my first adventure, I look back on it with fondness and good memories. It was my first time figuring out the mechanics of Pokemon, battling, having a starter, beating gym leaders, and becoming a champion for the first time. It's kind of surreal to think that kids today are having those same first-time experiences with Scarlet and Violet, and making those lifelong memories. I often wonder if they're going to look back with nostalgic rose-colored glasses the same way I look back on my first Pokemon adventures.